Welcome back to the deep dive, everybody.
You ready for some
Today
new
we're diving into some serious insider political talk.
insider talk?
We're going to be dissecting a conversation between a veteran political journalist
Oh, yeah.
and Tucker Carlson.
Okay.
This journalist has been covering politics for ages. He's seen it all.
Right.
And what he's saying about this election, well, let's just say it's not your typical headlines.
No, not at all.
You're not going to see this on CNN.
No.
So,
This is really like a peek behind the curtain.
yeah.
You know, it's like we're getting into the minds of people who are really shaping
The back rooms, the slow-filled rooms.
the narratives, yeah.
So one of the things that he says right off the bat, and this is a bombshell,
Yeah,
is that he thinks this election could swing either way, big time.
he does. He thinks it could be a landslide.
Landslide.
Hang on, really?
So much for those nail-biter nights we were all expecting.
Yeah, so different from what we're hearing from,
The mainstream media.
from the polls.
Yeah.
He thinks it's going to be a landslide for one candidate or the other.
What makes him think it could be so one-sided?
Well, he doesn't name any names,
Okay.
but he does hint that there is concern among even Democrats about their chosen candidate.
Interesting. Okay.
And he says the whole thing could hinge on one state,
Which state?
Arizona.
Arizona. Really? I thought those Midwestern battleground states.
Miami.
Michigan, Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's what we
Usually hear.
But he's saying Arizona is the one to watch this time.
Why Arizona all of a sudden?
He says the demographics are changing like crazy.
Right.
It's not the same Arizona it was even 4 years ago.
Gotcha.
And speaking of candidates, he had some very interesting things to say about Kamala Harris.
Ooh, this is where it gets juicy.
Yeah.
Lay it on me. What's he saying?
Okay, so basically he says even after all this time, knowing her, covering her, he still can't figure out what she actually stands for. And he points to those moments where she seems to kind of fumble even basic questions. Like, remember when she struggled to explain how she would be different from Biden?
Yeah.
It's like Politics 101, you got to have that answer down, Pat.
I got it.
And she just couldn't articulate it clearly.
Yeah, if you can't answer that, you're in trouble.
Exactly.
So what's her strategy to turn things around? What is she doing?
Okay, so this is where it gets a little interesting. Hold on to your hats.
Okay.
He says she is making a major play for black male voters
Okay.
in these final weeks.
Okay. So.
Which, on the surface that might sound smart,
Yeah.
but when you consider her staunch pro-choice stance,
Right.
it can actually alienate some of those voters.
Interesting.
So this journalist thinks it's a risky move, and he also thinks it might point to a larger shift in, how black men are voting overall.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
He's thinking way beyond the surface level stuff.
he is.
He doesn't stop there.
Nope.
Now let's talk money and media.
Right. Two big factors that are always at play.
Always.
What's his take? How does he see that shaking out?
Okay, so first off, he calls it a major financial imbalance between the campaigns. He says the Democrats are raking in the small dollar donations online,
Interesting.
which gives them a huge edge, he thinks, when it comes to things like running ads and get out the vote efforts.
Hold up. Is he saying those donate $5 buttons actually make a difference?
He seems to think so.
Wow. Okay.
But you know what he's really skeptical of?
What's that?
Polls.
Polls.
He thinks they're totally unreliable these days.
Yeah, those polls have been all over the place.
Oh, exactly.
Why doesn't he trust them?
He blames cost-cutting in newsrooms.
Okay.
He says they're not putting enough resources into getting accurate samples of likely voters.
It's like garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. It's like trying to bake a cake without measuring the ingredients.
Right.
You might end up with something edible,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be what you were hoping for.
Yeah.
So he's saying we shouldn't take those poll numbers as gospel?
He is very skeptical.
Okay.
There's something else that gets under his skin, though.
Okay. What's that?
What he calls a blatant media bias.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to covering, shall we say, Biden's cognitive slip-ups. Remember that time when Biden seemed to be talking to a congresswoman who had passed away?
Yeah.
He uses that as a prime example of the media downplaying or straight up ignoring some of Biden's more noticeable moments.
Okay.
He even calls it the worst scandal in American journalism.
Whoa. Strong words. He doesn't hold back, does he?
No. He does not mince words.
But what does this alleged media bias mean for us regular folks?
Well, think about it. If you're only getting one side of the story,
Yeah,
how can you make an informed decision?
right.
He thinks the media is failing to give you the full picture,
Okay.
which could influence how you vote, even how you perceive the country after the election.
That's a little unnerving.
It is.
So what happens next? How does he see things playing out after the votes are in?
He paints a pretty grim picture of what might happen if Trump wins.
Okay.
He predicts widespread despair, maybe even a mental health crisis among Democrats.
Mental health crisis. Seriously.
He says many Democrats view a Trump victory as like the ultimate evil.
Hmm.
He even suggests there could be a rise in, well, let's just say people might be hitting the bottle a bit harder.
Hmm.
But on a more serious note, he is genuinely worried about the mental and emotional toll it could take.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
It is.
What about if Harris wins? Does he think it'll be smooth sailing?
Not necessarily.
Why not?
He thinks Trump and his supporters will likely challenge the results,
Oh, of course.
especially if it's a close race.
Yeah.
And he's not too happy about the lack of preparation from states to ensure a transparent and easily verifiable election process.
So basically, we should brace ourselves for potential chaos no matter who wins.
Unfortunately, yeah. He thinks the combination of a deeply divided electorate, razor-thin margins, and a lack of trust in institutions
Yeah.
creates a perfect storm for post-election turmoil. He's basically saying, buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride no matter what.
Yeah.
But there's one group he thinks has a huge role to play in all this.
Okay, who's that?
Governors.
Governors. Okay, I hadn't really thought about their part in all of this.
He says they're key to making sure the transition of power goes smoothly and peacefully no matter who wins.
Okay.
He's hoping they've got plans in place to deal with any potential unrest or misinformation.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're kind of like the referees of the election, right? Keeping things fair and in check.
Exactly. And he doesn't just want them reacting to problems. He says they need to be proactive, clearly communicating with the public about how the votes are being counted, especially if there are any hiccups or delays. Transparency is key here.
So no shady business going on behind closed doors.
Right, exactly.
Got it. But what if, even with all that transparency, the results are still super close?
Well, he predicts both campaigns are already lawyering up, ready to launch legal challenges if things go down to the wire, especially those key battleground states.
Oh, yeah.
And he's worried because our election system is so decentralized, with different rules in every state, even every county.
Right.
It's like a recipe for disputes and delays.
Ugh, so we could be in for a long and messy fight that's not exactly reassuring.
He doesn't sugarcoat it. He thinks all the ingredients are there for some serious post-election chaos.
Okay, well, that's enough doom and gloom for one day. Let's shift gears. This journalist doesn't just obsess over the presidential race. He's got some interesting thoughts on bigger societal trends, too.
Oh, yeah. He goes deep.
Wait on me.
Like, for instance, he talks about the decline of traditional masculinity and the impact that's having on young men.
Yeah, I've heard people say that's contributing to some guys feeling lost or left behind.
He's on board with that idea.
Yeah.
He thinks the decline to those traditional male roles has left a void, and guess who steps in to fill it? Figures like Trump. He also connects it to the rise of gaming and online culture, saying those virtual worlds give some guys a sense of purpose and community that they're not finding in real life.
Yeah, it's almost like they're escaping into these online worlds because they feel like they don't have a place in the real one, pretty deep stuff.
And he goes even deeper, asking some big questions about the role of religion and faith in a society that's becoming more and more secular.
That's a minefield right there. People have strong opinions about religion.
He's not afraid of a little controversy.
Yeah.
He suggests that as traditional religious institutions decline, people are looking for other things to believe in, sometimes even political ideologies.
So it's like when people lose faith in God, they start putting their faith in politicians or political movements.
Exactly. And he even hints at the possibility of a religious revival, maybe as a reaction to all the craziness going on in society. He thinks it could be a good thing, leading to spiritual renewal, or it could turn ugly, fueling political extremism. It's a double-edged sword.
Wow, a lot to think about there. This guy is really connecting the dots between all these different trends. What about the impact of technology and social media we all know? That's changing the game when it comes to politics.
He's got a lot to say about that, and most of it's not good.
Hmm.
He's worried about the echo chamber effect, where people are only exposed to information that confirms their existing beliefs. It's like living in a bubble.
Yeah, and we all know those bubbles can get pretty toxic. Everyone's shouting their opinions, but nobody's really listening.
Right, and social media just makes it worse, rewarding outrage and emotional appeals over reasoned debate. It's the stuff that gets people riled up that goes viral, which just fuels more division and makes it harder to have a civil conversation.
He's got a point. It's like the internet is designed to make us angry.
And then there's the issue of censorship and manipulation. We've
Right.
already seen social media companies suppressing certain viewpoints or promoting others.
Yeah, it's scary to think those companies have so much power over what we see and hear.
He thinks it's only going to get worse. He sees those platforms becoming tools for controlling and manipulating public opinion, not for fostering open and honest debate, which ironically is what the internet was supposed to be all about.
Okay. I'm officially depressed now. Can we talk about something a little less bleak?
How about foreign policy? That's always a cheerful topic. He had some interesting things to say about the media's coverage of the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, that's been a huge issue for the current administration. What's his take?
He doesn't hold back. He accuses the media of pushing a simplistic and biased narrative, one that's too pro-Ukraine. He thinks they're not giving enough attention to the potential costs and risks of the U.S. getting further involved in the conflict.
Is he saying we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine?
He's not saying that exactly. He just thinks the media should be presenting a more balanced view.
Mm.
He points out that there's actually strong bipartisan agreement against getting bogged down in these forever wars, but that sentiment isn't being reflected in the media coverage.
So he's saying the media are out of touch with what most Americans actually want.
He seems to think so, and he's also critical of how the media portrays China.
Yeah, China's a big deal. Obviously, they're like our biggest rival right now.
He thinks the media often paint China as this big, bad, monolithic enemy without acknowledging the complexities of Chinese society and politics. He argues that we need a more nuanced understanding of China if we want to avoid unnecessary conflict and develop effective policies.
So not just seeing them as the bad guys, but trying to understand where they're coming from makes sense. What else does he get into?
Well, he goes on a bit of a rant about money and politics. No surprises there.
Yeah, everyone complains about that. What's his beef?
He's not a fan of how much influence wealthy donors and special interests have. He thinks they have way too much power over policy decisions, which undermines the whole idea of one person, one vote.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that, but hasn't there been like campaign finance reform and stuff to try to fix that?
He's not convinced those reforms are working. He thinks the problem goes deeper than just limiting campaign contributions. It's about systemic corruption. The revolving door between government and industry. As long as rich people and corporations have special access to policymakers, money will always find a way to corrupt the system.
Okay, so what's the solution then?
He doesn't offer any easy answers, but he does raise some interesting questions about the role of government in society. He seems to be a bit of a libertarian, concerned about the growth of government power and the erosion of individual liberty.
Right, that's the classic left versus right debate, right? Small government versus big government.
He definitely leans towards the smaller is better side of things. He thinks government intervention often causes more problems than it solves.
So less government meddling, more individual responsibility.
That's the gist of it. He worries about the rise of what he calls the nanny state, where there's so many regulations and rules that people become dependent on the government to take care of them.
Interesting. I can see how too much government control could stifle individual initiative. But what about issues like poverty or healthcare? Don't we need the government to step in sometime?
He acknowledges those issues, but he doesn't think the government is always the best solution.
Yeah.
He actually has some pretty strong opinions about the economy.
Well, the economy is always a big factor in elections. What's he worried about?
He's sounding the alarm about the national debt, which has gotten totally out of control. He thinks it's a ticking time bomb that could lead to a major financial crisis.
Okay, that's definitely something to worry about. What does he think we should do about it?
He blames the Federal Reserve for their policies, which he thinks have fueled inflation and created these unsustainable asset bubbles. He wants to see a more responsible approach to monetary policy and a return to fiscal sanity.
Basically, stop spending money. We don't have solid advice. Anything else on his economic hit list?
He's also concerned about the decline of American manufacturing. We've lost so many jobs overseas, and he thinks that's hollowed out the middle class and weakened the economy as a whole.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Bringing those jobs back isn't easy.
He thinks we need policies that incentivize companies to manufacture here in the U.S., create good-paying jobs, boost the economy, the whole 9 yards. And he ties that into another one of his big concerns, income inequality.
Yeah, the gap between the rich and the poor seems to be getting wider all the time.
He finds that both morally wrong and economically unsustainable. He wants policies that create opportunities for everyone, not just those at the top.
So, more economic fairness. I think most people would agree with that. What about other big issues like education?
He's not impressed with the public education system. He thinks it's failing to prepare students for the challenges of the 21st century.
I mean, it's no secret our education system has its problems.
He's a big advocate for school choice and giving parents more control over their kids' education. He's also worried about the skyrocketing cost of college and the crushing burden of student loan debt. He wants to see policies that make college more affordable and reduce that debt load for graduates.
Makes sense college shouldn't be a luxury only the wealthy can afford.
He also wades into the healthcare debate, which is always a hot topic.
Yeah, everyone's got an opinion on healthcare. What's his take?
He's not a fan of the current system, which he finds too expensive and bureaucratic. He wants to see a more market-based approach with more competition and innovation. He thinks that's the best way to lower costs and improve the quality of care.
So, less government involvement, more free market solutions.
He also worries about the erosion of the doctor-patient relationship. He thinks all the red tape from insurance companies and government regulations is getting in the way of doctors being able to provide personalized care to their patients.
That's a good point. It's easy to feel like just a number in the healthcare system sometimes.
He wants policies that put patients back in control and restore that essential doctor-patient bond. And speaking of hot-button issues, he doesn't shy away from immigration either.
Oh boy, immigration is always a controversial one. What's his stance?
He's worried about the impact of illegal immigration on the economy and national security. He wants stronger border security and tougher enforcement of immigration laws.
So he's taking a hard line on illegal immigration.
He's not against legal immigration, but he thinks it should be merit-based. He wants immigrants who have skills and can contribute to the American economy, not just anyone who shows up.
Okay, that's a pretty common viewpoint these days. What about crime and criminal justice? That's been a big issue lately, too.
He thinks the soft-on-crime approach has gone too far.
Mm.
He believes we need tougher law enforcement and stricter penalties to keep communities safe.
So he's more on the law and order side of things.
But he's not just about locking people up. He supports criminal justice reform, but he wants it to focus on rehabilitation and helping former offenders successfully reintegrate into society. He also believes we need to address the root causes of crime, things like poverty and lack of opportunity.
Right, it's a multifaceted problem, that's for sure. And I bet he's got thoughts on race relations, too.
He does. He's critical of what he calls the identity politics agenda, which he thinks divides people along racial lines and weakens national unity.
So he's saying we should focus on what unites us, not what divides us.
Exactly. He's also against affirmative action, arguing that it's discriminatory and unfair. He thinks people should be judged on their merits, not their race.
He's not pulling any punches, is he?
He's got strong opinions, that's for sure. And he brings those opinions to bear on foreign policy, too, especially when it comes to the Middle East.
Yeah, the Middle East is always a complicated one. What's his take?
He's critical of the U.S.'s long-standing support for Israel, arguing that it's fueled conflict in the region. He wants to see a more even-handed approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Okay, so less blindly supporting Israel, more trying to find a peaceful solution for everyone involved.
That's his position. He's also critical of the U.S.'s involvement in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He thinks those wars were unnecessary and counterproductive.
A lot of people share that view.
He advocates for a more restrained and pragmatic approach to foreign policy in the Middle East, basically saying we should be more careful about getting involved in other countries' conflicts.
Makes sense. Those wars have cost us a lot in terms of lives and resources. What about other global issues, climate change, for instance?
He's not exactly on board with the whole climate change alarmist narrative.
Okay.
He's skeptical about the severity of the problem and the effectiveness of proposed solutions.
So he's not a climate change denier, but he's not panicking about it either.
He thinks the science isn't settled and the costs of addressing climate change are too high.
Mm.
He also criticizes what he sees as the overly apocalyptic rhetoric surrounding the issue.
Right. He's saying we need to be realistic and practical about it, not just freaking out.
That's the gist of it. And then he gets into the impact of technology on society, which is something we all think about these days.
Yeah, technology's changing everything so fast it's hard to keep up.
He's worried about the potential for technology to be used for surveillance and control. He's also concerned about the impact on jobs and the economy, which is something a lot of people are worried about.
Yeah, automation, taking over robots, stealing our jobs, all that.
He's advocating for a more balanced and humane approach to technological development. He thinks we need to harness the power of technology for good, while also being mindful of the potential risks.
So not just blindly embracing every new gadget, but being thoughtful about how we use technology.
Exactly. And finally, he offers some thoughts on the future of the U.S. as a whole.
Well, this is a pretty pivotal moment in our history. What's his outlook?
He's definitely concerned about the direction the country is headed. He sees a lot of problems, economic inequality,
Yeah.
political polarization, a decline in social trust. He thinks we need to rediscover our shared values and find ways to work together to solve these problems.
So it sounds like he's calling for a return to unity and civility. Is he optimistic about the future?
He doesn't sound overly optimistic, but he doesn't give up hope either. He believes the American people are resilient and capable of overcoming any challenge. He calls for a renewal of the American spirit, a recommitment to the principles of liberty and justice for all future. It's a call to action, really.
That's actually pretty inspiring. So, what's your takeaway from all this? What stood out to you as the most insightful or maybe surprising thing this journalist had to say?
It's hard to pick just one thing. This guy covers so much ground. It's like a whirlwind tour of the American psyche.
That does.
But what really struck me, I think, is his emphasis on the individual.
Okay.
Even with all this talk of elections and, all the political maneuvering,
Right.
he keeps circling back to the importance of personal responsibility, of
Yeah.
people taking ownership of their lives and their communities.
Yeah, he doesn't let us off the hook.
No, not at all.
He's basically saying, hey, all this stuff is important, but don't forget about your own agency, your own power to make a difference.
Right, exactly.
It's a good message.
He's not just analyzing the political landscape.
Yeah.
He's challenging us to think about our role in all of it.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why should you care about what this one journalist has to say?
Well, because it gives you a different lens
Okay.
to view this election through.
Yeah,
He's not just regurgitating the same old talking points.
right.
He's offering a fresh perspective. He's connecting the dots between politics, culture, technology, all of it.
Yeah.
He's pushing us to think critically, to question the narratives we're being fed, and to engage with the issues on a deeper level.
He's basically saying, don't be a passive consumer of news. Be an active participant in the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, he reminds us that the stakes are high.
Right.
This isn't just a horse race.
No.
These choices have real consequences
Sure.
for people's lives, for the future of the country, even for the world.
So as you're, scrolling through your news feed or watching the debates,
Right.
keep this guy's insights in mind.
Yeah.
Don't just accept the headlines at face value.
Right.
Think critically, ask questions, and maybe even have some uncomfortable conversations with people who see things differently than you do.
That's so important.
It is.
At the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Engaging with each other, trying to understand different perspectives, and finding some common ground.
Yeah.
That's how we move forward as a society, even when things feel chaotic and divided.
And don't forget, your voice matters. This isn't just a spectator sport.
Nope.
You have the power to influence the outcome.
You do.
So get informed, get involved, and make your voice heard.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
This election, this moment in history, it's not just something that's happening to us.
Right.
It's something we're all creating together.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
Wow, this has been quite a deep dive.
it is.
So much to think about, so much to unpack. I feel like I need a nap and a strong drink after all that.
Me too.
Yeah.
But it's a good kind of exhaustion, right?
Yes.
The kind that comes from engaging with challenging ideas and expanding your understanding of the world.
Exactly. And that's what the deep dive is all about.
It is.
Giving you the tools to navigate the complexities of our world and to make sense of the things that matter most.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you.
And we hope you'll continue to dive deep with us as we explore the issues shaping our world.
We'll see you next time.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay informed of setting the